Welcome everyone to our webinar. This is presented by Hubly and fpPathfinder. The topic today is proving your value, mastering client prospecting and engagement. I'm first going to explain what we will be talking about today. I will of course do the speaker introduction, and then we're going to jump into a fireside chat with Scott Benjamin to discuss how he demonstrates value to prospects. And then he'll also give us a live demo of how he utilizes Hubly and fpPathfinder together to do this. And then at the end, we will open it up to a Q&A to answer some of your burning questions. So to introduce our speakers, first we have Michael Lecor. Michael is a co-founder of fpPathfinder and is also a financial advisor and planner on the Wealth Strategies team. So Michael actually began his career in financial services in advertising, and now he leverages his background in advertising to distill complex financial planning concepts into straightforward strategies and applies behavioral financial concepts to the planning process. Scott Benjamin is the founder and managing member of Firethorn Wealth Partners. Thank you so much, Scott, for joining us today. So Scott,
thank you.
Scott, you've been a financial advisor since 1997. And Scott is a certified financial planner and a certified investment management analyst. He provides elite services and strategic guidance to clients, ensuring an integrated approach to their overall financial goals. And Scott is also an avid user of both Hubly and fpPathfinder. And we're also joined by Megan Rutherford. So Megan is the customer training and onboarding manager at Hubly. She is a financial services professional with over 20 years of experience in a variety of roles, including business development, marketing, operations, and client service. And if you didn't know, she actually first was introduced to Hubly as a user of the software, and now she works for Hubly and brings her knowledge to our customers with training and support. So Megan, I'm going to pass it over to you to give a quick overview of what it is that Hubly does, and then we'll pass it over to Michael to give a quick overview of fpPathfinder.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tessa. I'm super excited to kick off today's webinar. Love the topic that we are talking about today. As Tessa mentioned, I typically spend my day-to-day as a Hubly trainer, so it's fun every once in a while to put on my marketing hat. For those of you who are not familiar with Hubly, it is a process management system that provides efficiency, documentation, and visibility across financial advisory firms. Teams typically look to Hubly as a solution to ensure that they can deliver on their promises to clients, and so that their teams can work together in one integrated system, leaving nothing to fall through the cracks, as one of our favorite expressions goes. So really, our software works in tandem with your CRM that allows us to pull in relevant data that you need to launch client service workflows, to automate scheduling and other routine processes, and to identify planning opportunities, based on segmentation and age milestones, other important client data. So in a moment, Scott's actually going to demo the software, which is going to give you a much better lens into what Hubly does than how I can cover it in a matter of a minute or two. So with that, I will kick it over to Michael to give his fpPathfinder overview.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Megan. So basically what we do here at fpPathfinder is we create checklists and flow charts to help advisors have more diligent conversations with their clients. And we do that with two tools. It's these checklists and flow charts. The checklists help advisors uncover planning issues for their clients, and the flow charts help to break down the various decision points that clients have to consider when making decisions on their finances. And so basically, advisors are using us in one of three ways. Some use us behind the scenes. We are like their internal resource. Clients never actually know that the advisor is using a checklist or flow chart to provide guidance. Other advisors are saying, hey, I want to actually use this as a client engagement tool. They're actually taking our checklists and flow charts and they're branding them to put their logo and their color palette on it to put it in front of a client, whether it's in a client meeting or it's in their marketing efforts. It's trying to take a lot of the complexity that we all know as financial advisors exist and show it to a client. And then the third group of advisors really use us to help systematize their advisory business, and specifically around client meetings. And so with this conversation that we're having today, Scott does this terrific job of really incorporating the latter two use cases. Advisors that are using it as a member or client engagement tool, and then also to help systematize the process, which is really awesome because that's where Hubly really lives. So I'm really excited to dig into this.
Fantastic. So let's kick off our fireside chat. We have invited Scott to be our spokesperson here. He's going to do a much better job than Michael or I could do in talking about our tools and how firms use them day to day. So the idea here is to get behind the scenes with a firm that's using both, and hopefully give all of you on the call some ideas on how you could leverage these tools. So with that, Scott, let's kick it off with just a bit of an overview of yourself, your business. Let's talk about Firethorn a little bit so that the audience knows kind of what your firm looks like and your client service model.
Sure. So we're a small firm. We have 3 founding partners. We have an associate advisor, and we have 3 folks in support. So the biggest thing for me is a repeatable process, and I think we're maniacally focused on a client experience, but also I guess the prospect experience too. And I tell folks, I don't think we've created a proposal in probably 10 years. So our onboarding, that is our proposal tool. And we have a series of meetings, most likely 2 or 3. And at the end of those meetings, we decide, are we a good fit, or the client decides, is the relationship going to be productive? And it moves on from there.
Great. Are you guys a comprehensive financial planning firm? Do you lead with financial planning?
Yes, we lead with financial planning, absolutely.
And so that is all part of, would you say, 90% of the new people that come through your door go through your planning process?
Well, we'd like it to be 100%.
Of course.
But yes, probably. Well, I mean, the initial meetings, all of these meetings are financial planning driven. So again, I know we're going to get into this, but the fpPathfinder, our onboarding process, that's, Hubly, I guess, as my partner likes to say, keeps us between the mayonnaise and the mustard. So yeah, they're all planning driven through using both of these tools extensively.
Great segue to talking a bit about your tech stack, Scott. And so, what was kind of like the impetus for finding Hubly and fpPathfinder? Which one came first? And, were you trying to solve a problem, or, how did you come across these tools?
Yeah. So when we were talking before the meeting, I was looking at Michael's screen like, wow, that looks like my desktop. You've got the Kitsis icons running across. So we are big fans of Kitsis. I can't read everything, but I try to read most of everything. And so that's how I found both of you guys. And so we started with fpPathfinder, and I am not very tech savvy, and the workflow process in Redtail was just incredibly frustrating. It was tough to customize, it was tough to create, and so through reading Kitsis, we came across Hubly, and so we still use Redtail, and again, we've segregated different tasks for Hubly. I guess immediate day-to-day is still driven by Redtail, process driven, experiences driven by Hubly.
Okay, I think that's what we're hearing too with other advisors that are using Hubly or considering it. Could you just elaborate a little bit about on that thought process, like how you guys arrived at that, and what pushed you over the edge to like get away from the workflow systems built in the CRMs and migrate over to Hubly?
Ease of use, and Hubly's just it's intuitive, it's easy to grasp. If you want to augment something, you want to create something, although I was kidding around before the call, boy, if you put me on the spot to build out a brand new view on this, I'm probably going to struggle a little bit. But all kidding aside, it's very intuitive. Both tools are incredibly easy to use.
Yeah.
And so how did you come to the place of like integrating the two and kind of seeing where the like overlap is in, you know, the overall experience and kind of.
Well, again, for us, and I read all this kind of ties back to the advisor playbook, which I'm going to assume some people have read, and that's the only kind of practice help book that the rest of them I just didn't like. But that I'm like, all right, I get it. I don't want to ask for referrals. Let's create a referable experience. Let's create a process. Let's create a repeatable process. So both of these tools lend to that perfectly, and not letting something slip through the cracks. And I'm not perfect, and so we have this process, and we try to use a brand new fpPathfinder for every annual strategy review. But sometimes I'll get lax and just say, let's cover 3 or 4 points that they've highlighted in the conversations throughout the year, and we'll put that on the agenda. And we also want every meeting to have an agenda. But Hubly recenters me. It brings me back. Wait a second. We've got to be, thorough and making sure. So I will even kind of veer off toward the mayonnaise or the mustard every once in a while. But that's also why I love, the Hubly tool, because it brings us back. It refocuses, recenters our process.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing you say there, Scott, is like you use Hubly to kind of keep you on the right path and to keep, that consistent client experience by having things embedded in a task list that you do every single time for every single customer. And then the fpPathfinder piece is really being able to like do a deeper dive to give your clients resources to embed that. I know we're going to go through it in a demo in a minute, but to embed some of their questionnaires and things like that to really tailor your experience to the client at, the various milestones and meetings that you have throughout the customer journey.
Yes. So when we sit down with a prospect, they've already filled out a checklist, whether that's master list of goals or new client, or maybe something else that's more pertinent to their situation. But I try to begin that meeting by saying, look, thank you for filling out the checklist. I want to make sure that when you walk out of here after an hour, God forbid an hour and a half, that you feel like we've accomplished something. The worst thing that could happen is that you walk out of here and think, what in the world did we accomplish? And so that's what fpPathfinder, well, 2 things. Make sure you have a very productive meeting and you can be ready for a meeting in a flash, because you know exactly what you're going to talk about. You've already, again, I don't do things the most efficient way. So I basically copy and paste to our agenda template the checklist response, and then, I whittle it down a little bit from there. But that takes a matter of minutes, and you're ready for a meeting where, in a former life, that would have taken hours. All right, well, what are we going to talk about? Well, what do we want to show them? We already know that. So we hit the ground running in the first meeting with somebody that we're just meeting for the first time.
And then with that, go ahead, Michael.
Well, Scott, it's funny when you were talking about the Kitces articles tabs that I have up. There's one in particular that resonates with me for this conversation. It was something that I had written a few years ago about the challenge that advisors have, and it's more like any service-based business has, but how do you demonstrate the value to a prospective client when they can't actually see a financial plan? It's like, it's an intangible item.
Right.
And so the premise of the article was there are some key characteristics out there that advisors or anybody that provides a service could utilize to help show that prospective client what they could expect to receive and the value. And it's some things like, are you doing what you say you're going to do? Just like, you have good follow through. Are you responsive? If it takes like 5 days to get back to a prospect. What do you think it's going to be like if it's like in a client relationship? And so it goes down, like the article takes a different tilt. It goes down to tangibles, which are like physical deliverables. But part of that article too is the whole systemization of the process to specifically give an insight as to what it's going to be like. So it's not the literal content that may be covered, but it's, we can address this quickly. We have this system and this process, and clients see that and they go, this is what it's going to be like to be a client.
Right. Again, it comes back, which is important for us in our day as well, but making efficient, giving value back in an efficient meeting process.
Yeah.
I think the other thing you touched on earlier as well, Scott, is the whole notion of you get calls and emails flying at you throughout the day, and you never know what you're going to hear from the client on the other end of the line, right? So they call you and pour their heart out to you and say, we're going through a divorce, and
I've got
go ahead.
cancer. It's incurable. We've got somebody just found that out, 55. He's probably not going to make it more than 6 to 8 months. So again, my first thought popped in the head. All right, let's go to fpPathfinder and let's find something to send to his wife, who's dealing, with a lot, obviously.
Right.
And again, the response is, thank you so much for sending this. This is extremely helpful.
And without a tool like fpPathfinder, you're left trying to craft something that might take you, a while to write and put together and think through all of those things when you're personally engaged, and then you have to submit it to compliance and wait for approval.
Yeah.
And
you're GTSing it and sending an article link instead of sending something that's branded with your logo in a digital link to a checklist.
Yeah, because the vast majority of advisors that run into that kind of situation, they don't know that stuff off the top of their head. There's no way to know that because the rules keep changing. And so they are frantically searching on Google to try to figure something out. And you don't know if that information's right or accurate. Yeah.
Exactly.
It comes back to this repeatable process, right? So the idea here is, in leveraging these two tools together, you can start to build some workflows that are related to divorce or death of a client or, client illness. And you can start to think about what does our process look like when we're in a conversation with a client like that? Where can we, put a plug or a task into our Hubbly workflow to go leverage the fpPathfinder resource on that subject? So I think, that all kind of ties nicely together in the way that you do things. And I'd love for you mentioned to Michael and I that you just have, a time set aside every day too, to just kind of think through what conversations have I had with clients and, where can, I add some additional value by sending them fpPathfinder resources.
Right. Well, I don't know that I set aside a lot of time to think about it. I have a constant reminder throughout the day that no matter what I'm thinking about or the conversations that I'm having, there's probably an fpPathfinder checklist or flowchart that I can send that will add value to the engagement or the conversation.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I think the best way to do this now is to show the people on the call how you've actually embedded some of the resources into Hubbly so that you can use these tools together in a systematized way. So we're going to jump out and have Scott actually share his Real Hub with the group. And so if you are a Hubbly user, you'll be able to get some ideas on things that you can do in your own hub. And if you are not an fpPathfinder user, we're also going to show some of Scott's favorite fpPathfinder resources. So as we kick off this demo here, Scott is going to take us through, this is Scott's new client onboarding process today that he's showing you in Hubbly. And so, Scott, you can talk a little bit about your process and then we'll jump into, your step 3 where you're planning for that initial meeting. But I'd love, in your own words to kind of talk about your process.
Yeah, well, I just realizing I need more substance here. I've moved everybody over to step 2. All right, so
If anybody has any leads for Scott, feel free
yeah,
to
yeah,
put them in the chat.
Exactly. So literally, this starts with the first phone call, and most, if not all, of our prospects are referrals. So they will, however they communicate it, we'll attempt an email or a phone call. Hopefully we only have to do that once. I always want to make sure that we send a thank you note. I try to send more than one, spread out over a couple of months, but schedule. And right here is the new client checklist. So, if we, and also here's the initials of the team member that's responsible. Most of them are going to be SB. I'm a control freak, but
Right.
anybody can go in and complete this. So sometimes I'll reserve the conference room, whatever, but everybody gets the new client checklist, and we like to send that in an email format. We'll pop the link into here. We'll probably customize the email and send that out. Sometimes, depending on the initial conversation, if they highlight a specific need, again, cancel. Well, and sometimes we're meeting a prospect that's recently widowed. We'll get referrals for that. So we might send 2 checklists. We'll apologize and say, sorry for 2 checklists, but if you would, this will help, form the agenda for our introductory meeting.
I'd love for you to just show them like your first task in the initial consult. So in this flow here, this is where you're prepping for that first meeting with a customer.
Yeah.
And so, in the actual initial consult, that first task, where you're, sending the links, like you said, it's not always the same link. So you've built in you've built into your email template and into Hubly the specific links that you use over and over again, so that when it's time for your team to send that email out to your prospect to get ready for that meeting, the email's all already created and templated out here. And all your team needs to do is, customize that link. And if you can talk, might want to talk a little bit about that when we jump into the fpPathfinder resource of how you, customize
Sure.
for the client experience.
Well, we've got 2 references to make sure if it's missed, and this Hubly is completed, and then we've moved on here to make sure that we get that new client checklist out as we're creating the agenda.
So from Hubly, it's teeing up, it's giving you the links to specific guides that you've selected because they're part of your process, or they represent a core aspect to how you want to initiate a planning meeting.
Right.
And so that's one of the steps in these workflows over here. And you have a couple of tabs that you've pulled up over here that are directing people to. So if you're going to, I think you had issues to consider as a new client, walk people through why you use interactive checklists versus a PDF version of a checklist.
Yeah, I guess the easiest would be if we're meeting with somebody that's on the cusp of retirement. We are obviously not going to ask them if they're planning on having additional children. We can screen out questions that maybe are not appropriate. Maybe if somebody's newly divorced and we know that, and that's the reason they're coming to meet with us, we don't need to ask them if they're previously married. So we just, again, we want to customize the checklist and hide certain questions that maybe aren't appropriate for that particular engagement.
Right. And so here, and that's something that you can do as with an interactive checklist. You
Correct.
Can't do that with the PDF versions. They say the same. They've got a clean, nice, elegant look, but you can't personalize them to the client.
Right. Well, and maybe the bigger issue for us is the ease of the response. And so if all they have to do, and I most of the time make this promise to them in the email, hey, this will take you 60 seconds. You don't need to go pull up figures. All this information is swimming around in your head. If all they have to do is click on a link, the link opens up, they click yes or no, They can add some notes if they want, and then they click send and it comes right back to us. They're not having to print a PDF or print this off, fill it out, scan it, send it back. So we have 99.8% success rate. Usually we get it back extremely quickly with plenty of lead in time for the meeting and to get the agenda ready for the meeting.
Can you walk through or just tell do you have a story or an example that comes to mind of how this worked with a client?
I don't have a really exciting story because of it's boringly consistent in that the response rate is so high. We don't ever have to chase things down. And I remember before fpPathfinder, we were constantly chasing things down, not getting things because it required too much effort on the part of the prospect or the client.
Right.
I think it would be helpful too, Scott, if you bounce back to Hubbly and just open up, one of your, if you close the template version, right? And let's look at your step 3 new client initial consult meeting and somebody who happens to be in the workflow. We do have privacy on here. That's why you're seeing things blurred out. This is going to show you, the steps that the team has gone through, which
Yes.
does incorporate the, making sure that goes out, making sure that we get it back, making sure that the meeting is booked and all of these various steps stay very streamlined and consistent throughout the experience. So, I mean, is there ever a meeting that you do, Scott, that you don't get the questionnaire back?
Not that it comes to mind. I'm sure it exists. Usually it's some of these other tasks that are, overdue. It's rarely ever. And again, I'm racking my brain trying to come up with a story for Michael, but
That's all right.
it's usually not. It's rarely ever the fpPathfinder issue.
And I think the other thing too is, right, that drives your agenda, like you were saying. So depending on how they answer your questionnaire, you're building your agenda to cover the things that are most important to them. First, making sure you spend the time on the things that are important to the client or prospect. And that's all generated from the questionnaire, correct?
Yes. And maybe that is part of the reason they respond is you make that pledge to them in the initial email. This is going to form our agenda. Again, trying to plant that seed for efficient use of your time when you come in to see us. So I think they're more than happy to open up a digital link. They see that it doesn't take a lot of their time and they can tell us a lot about themselves before we even meet. But I even down here, after we've gone through a lot of the onboarding process, there's a reminder that, hey, if there's anything that came up in the onboarding process that maybe could, that an fpPathfinder checklist or flowchart, we have reminders everywhere.
Actually, I'd like you to kind of go into that a little bit more because you're highlighting an interesting aspect of embracing something that a lot of other advisors aren't doing right now. And there's a big theme right now about creating a systematized service calendar. Now, so this is like fast forward, you have existing clients we're talking about.
Yeah.
But the theme that is pretty common and growing is saying clients are going to get a more systematized process or experience. In Q1, we're going to be doing some tax planning. In Q2, we're going to review investments and cash flow. Q3, we're going to review insurance in 1 year, and we'll do estate planning the subsequent year, and we keep rotating. And then Q4, we're going to do end of year tax planning review and things to look at then.
Yep.
You were kind of structuring it a little bit different. And
well, we do that too. Again, I'm not saying anybody should run their practice like I run my practice, but yeah, we're following the service calendar that you guys put out. We love the one things to do at the beginning of the year.
Right.
And that's, so we talk about annual client meetings. So now I'm moving over to that piece. And so if we're doing an annual strategy review meeting with somebody at the beginning of the year, instead of the annual review checklist, because we sent that last year, we'll send things to do at the beginning of the year.
Right. So you start to break it up a little bit, and you're looking at not just like I need to repeat something each year, but it's more of
Yeah,
I want
yeah,
to keep changing it up for
yeah.
clients.
Well, once you go through the master list of goals and you've exhausted or accomplished that, obviously you don't want to send them the master list of goals again. So we do like to change it up so it's always fresh. I think that keeps the client engaged. So you're always covering relevant topics with them.
There's an analogy out there about how does this translate to other industries? And one that I come back to is when you go to a gym, some people, they will go and they do the same workout every week or every other day. They're doing the same workout, right? Lots of value to that. But then there are other people where they say, I get too bored. I don't like that. And I need to go to a program like CrossFit, where every time I go, it's a completely different exercise. And it's kind of interesting just to see how these camps start to emerge about some folks where they're saying, I like the systemization part, but I want to keep it fresh and different.
Yes.
And so how can I balance the two? Because I don't
Yeah.
want to be sending my clients the same thing every year. I need to change it up.
Well, that's Hubley and fpPathfinder. So Hubley keeps
Right.
us doing the same thing over and over again. The library or catalog for fpPathfinder allows us to keep it fresh and
Right.
I
constantly
love that.
relevant.
Because I think the key is there, if you have a workflow, no matter if it's, annual client review, or if you're doing surge meetings, or you're doing something like Michael said, which is kind of a hybrid of the two, right? Where you're doing more like an annual service calendar. If you build it out in Hubley so that you have your service calendar for the year, or the meetings that you're going to have with the customer for the year, and then you're just including a task that is related to fpPathfinder, we don't have to be so specific to say the exact resource that we're going to use at that point, but we might put 2 or 3 or 4 links in the workflow so that the team has the ability to kind of choose which one they're sending at that particular, marker in the client journey. And
Right.
so I love what you said there, Scott, that it's like, keep the system, but the actual link that you're sending, or the resource that you're sending, can be flexible, or can, be different for each client. The key is like just putting a task in your workflow, whether it's client review or new client onboarding, or maybe you have a divorce one that you send and you're including the resource from fpPathfinder to really, give that added value to your client at the, at the time that they need it.
Yes.
I love that. So I know that prompts you to, also have some other, client service. And if you're, on the call and you're a Hubley user, there's, lots of ideas that are probably spinning in your head of different workflows that you can embed a task to use those to make sure that you're really getting full utilization of your fpPathfinder, engagement as well. So, like I said, if you have a divorce workflow, or if you have some important milestone workflows, those are all really great places to, embed placeholders for fpPathfinder.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, Scott, I do have one question now. So you've now had the meeting with your client. You started off with Hubley. You may have shared an fpPathfinder checklist or flowchart. Now had the meeting. What happens afterwards? How are you sending guides as a follow-up? Are you building out your process in Hubley? What happens post-meeting?
So I guess I'll answer 2 ways. So in our qualified plan side of the business, which we do a fair amount of, we're trying to figure out how to work with Hubley and I know, I think I've asked Blair this question. Now he's probably, oh, that's the guy. So how do we get it to automatically reset? So in our qualified plan business, there's maybe even a little bit more of a regimented, not quite as improvisational process. And we'd like it when we complete the annual plan review for it to start all back over. Individual client business, there is a reminder. We have 2, what we'll call in-person meetings each year. and you could see that on the other screen, but it was the strategy review, which is more of a planning conversation. And again, all this we've lifted from other people that are far better at this than we are. But the other meeting on the other side of the calendar is, hey, what's happening in your life? What's new? What are we doing well? More importantly, what are we not doing well? And so those are our two big meetings. And there's a reminder in Hubly. That's what gets us to repeat the individual client Hubly process for the annual review, whether that's the strategy review or the how are we doing meeting. I don't know, did that answer your question?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's what we found on our side was that folks that started to implement more processes up front actually were able to really drastically change the amount of time they spent in the follow-up afterwards. So in a lot of cases, advisors would meet with their client and the client would show up in the meeting and say, I've got all these topics I want to cover with you. And I'm guilty of this too. And I'm going, I wish I knew. I should have been asking more, like done more upfront work, because then what happened is we have the meeting, then I have to go back and do the research, and then I have to do the follow-up. And is the follow-up now like going through the checklist or the flow chart myself, or is it at a time when I didn't have that content, I had to develop it myself? And all of a sudden the follow-up, I spent twice as much time doing the follow-up compared to the meeting prep.
Yeah, that rarely ever happens, again, because we're sending the checklist out on the front end of the meeting.
Right.
And so the checklist then becomes the agenda. So we do have follow-up. We want to send notes. That's part of the process, but it's not a time consuming. We already know that on the front end. So we've already done all that legwork on the front end, and we're not caught flat-footed, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The more, the more prep that you do on the front end, the better the process is for everyone, I think. I know my old advisor used to say, I want this to run like a dentist's office where I can walk in and, just greet the client and, get right to it. And so the more you build into your front end prep steps, the better off, the meeting, the better the meeting goes, and the better, the more time you save yourself as well.
Right.
Exactly.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone, for that insight. Michael, can you just give us an overview of how people that aren't using fpPathfinder can get started or learn more about that?
Yes, go to fpPathfinder.com. We have a lot of different checklists and flow charts up there as examples, so that you can really get under the hood and see what we're all about very easily there, and you can learn more. And if you have a question, we've got live demos where we really dig into all of the integrations, and we can show you how does it actually integrate with other tools and software that we have, and how other advisors are using it. So just hop on over.
Awesome. Of course, if you already are using fpPathfinder and Hubly, we encourage you to just embed your favorite fpPathfinder resources into your Hubly workflows. So again, they're just top of mind. You don't have to look for them. You don't have to think about it. It just comes into your daily practice. And if you are not yet a Hubly user, just visit our website to learn some more about it. Again, we have lots of live demos as well. Or you can book a call with our team to get a personalized demo and to talk about your business needs to see if Hubly is a good fit. Before we wrap up, I just want to hand it over to Michael and Megan to ask any more questions with Scott. Otherwise, I will give back the rest of the day to everyone joining our call.
No, this has been a terrific conversation for me, Scott. This is it's really awesome to see what you're doing over here with these two tools.
Thanks for providing the tools.
Yeah, for me as well, who's like one of the people who helps put together the Hubly templates, just this partnership and working with Michael has given us so many ideas on, the different milestones and age-based rules that we have and how we can further embed and work together and put those resources at the fingertips of people to help you connect the different tech in your tech stack. So if you want to reach out and have a conversation, our team would love to chat.
Yeah.
All things workflows and integrations, and help you better integrate the tech that you are using.
Yeah, well said, Megan.
Perfect. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Yep, take care. Have a great rest of the day.
Bye.